And that's the part you better wake up on, church. God eventually goes, you know what? Give it to them. You know what? If they want to be passive, if they want to retreat, if they think this is all just going to be okay, let's let them see. Let them learn through the experience of it, right? And that is who God is. And so we want to invite you into our worldview here, into what we kind of see and believe Trump to be in some ways, if you hadn't caught on yet. We've had this conversation many times, but we see Trump as that judge in a lot of ways, right? If you're sticking to this biblical worldview, and we hope that you now recognize that what we're saying is judges were not always the most godly people. That wasn't what they were. But they did recognize the ways of God in the world. They did recognize the ways of freedom and the ways of life and those sorts of things. And they did rescue God's people. It doesn't always have to be a godly man to rescue God's people. So
God anointed those judges for his purposes.
Yes.
Positioned them to fight the battle or to, take on the task that needed to be done in order to rescue the people and set them back on solid ground.
So how is Trump rescuing us? What is he rescuing us from? Like, what is it that maybe somebody there might not be seeing that we're seeing in this cultural Marxist move towards, socialism and communism? Like, what is it that Trump is doing to kind of, and I know this is very broad, this is a huge topic, but just some simple things that people might be able to verify with their eyeballs and go, oh yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be good for the freedom of man or for this country or for me to be able to be free and live the way I want to live. And Trump is fighting for that. Okay. Broader picture.
Yeah, well, like we've said, the tendency is for a people to go the way of the world, and the Israelites would forsake God and turn to the worldly systems and then get caught up in that and lose sight of God. And once that would happen, they had forsaken God, so God would allow and give them over to those decisions, which would then inevitably lead to the corruption from within that compromises the integrity of all the things in place that help keep them secure.
Yeah.
Number one being God's favor, but within that are the systems, whether it's a strong military or a strong economy or a national infrastructure, or the things that keep a people healthy and strong, and enable a society to function and sort of provide for its members. And so eventually all of that corrodes and decays, and you start making alliances then with the surrounding nations in order to, this nation is now a threat, so let's align ourselves with this nation to protect us against that group of people.
Yeah.
Let's do this and that because I'm not so sure, and is God with us? And they start doubting God and moving away from God and embracing more and more of the worldly kind of systems and being opportunistic in that and being more in like survival mode and based on their own strengths and wisdoms versus everything that God had provided. And so you could see the parallels in recent generations.
And I would say the Israelites were very naive because they had only served underneath the greatest king. Right? So because their king had been so good to them, they go, let's have a king like all the other nations, anticipating and assuming that the king that they would have would rule over them so graciously as the king that always has. And I think you could draw that parallel too. We are spoiled rotten and entitled because we live in the freest country the world has ever seen, off the blood of those who've come before us to fight and give us that freedom, and we don't even know what it's like not to have freedom. Like, we don't know what that's like, in the same way that the Israelites didn't know what it was like to be ruled over like all the other nations. Like, they didn't really get it, but they were soon going to get it. And God told them, He's going to take your kids. He's going to take your lands. He's going to take your money. Like, I'm just letting you know, this is what's coming. You want it, you got it. And Samuel's like, are you not listening to what God is saying? And then finally he's like, you know what, Samuel? Give it to him. And that's the part you better wake up on, church. God eventually goes, you know what? give it to them. You know what? If they want to be passive, if they want to retreat, if they think this is all just going to be okay, let's let them see. Let them learn through the experience of it, right? And that is who God is. He's everywhere like that through Scripture. Eventually, if you ask for it long enough, He'll give it to you.
When to follow God means that it's not, God is not promising to do everything for you. He's showing you the right way and how to do it, because he's created us and given us purpose, and so we follow His lead, and He teaches us the way. So, but we're called to be responsible, and to take that responsibility for ourselves, for our families, our community, and the world around us into our own hands, and give our efforts and abilities to that. And so as we would neglect God, we would also neglect His ways and instructions and His character. So that means that we inevitably neglect our responsibilities for the things that we ought to be in care of. And so as a nation, as we have, because we were content in the relative prosperity and peace that we had, as well as the allure of the pleasures of the world in after World War II, and the boom of the strong economy that we had and the consumer culture that developed.
By the way, we're going to get back on that cultural Marxist thing real soon when we can.
We're drawn into that, and through that become spoiled and complacent and neglecting our responsibilities, because it's almost as if every day is a holiday or a vacation, and we can enjoy comforts that we hadn't before. And so it's powerful. It takes hold in things that maybe begin with a good motive or a value, something like
the welfare state,
that, or schools, and
okay, or that.
Well, I mean, there's similar concept there. It's meant to provide a service. It's meant to
unlawful search and seizure on airplanes after 9/11,
build people up. But then we give too much. It becomes then easy, convenient to give away the responsibility of it.
Corrupt worldly systems see what we think is good things, and they take advantage of that, right? So in one sense, search and seizure sounds like a good thing. I mean, we just had a terrorist attack on 9/11, right? I mean, I was living in New York right after this, so like it was wild. I mean, cops would walk straight up to you on the subway and just go, "Let me search your bag." Well, that's illegal according to the Constitution, right? It's called what am I trying to say? I just said it. Unlawful search and seizure, right? That's illegal. You can't just come up and go, "Let me see your bag," right? But they were doing it because the people had been scared and needed to be safe, and so worldly systems that are controlled by men who are hungry for power see that opportunity, and they seize it and go, "Look, we'll just tell them that it's for their safety. And if we'll get them to give us this, what could we get them to give us next?" Right? And now you see this little thing called a mask mandate, right? Which is also not going down there. We have a whole video on it. Go check it out if you want to. But these little things, which you may think were silly for our position on mask, but these little things turn out to be huge things downstream, because they constantly get you to just corporately agree with the way of things, and you just get a little bit more and a little bit more controlled, until eventually that's how people in power own you, right? So, for instance, this will be a fun story. I was telling Dustin, I was down at the beach this past week with my family, Thanksgiving, my wife's family. I'll be quicker in the story, but I'm sitting around and I'm reading Sidney Powell's out at the boardwalk. So you can imagine it's a beach. We're in a park. There's tons of room on all sides. I'm 20 foot from the shower, 20 feet from the shower. I emphasize 20 feet, and nobody's around me. and I'm reading Sidney Powell's lawsuit in Georgia and Michigan, and all of a sudden I hear a voice. And this voice is from about a 58-year-old lady, I'm guessing, if she's watching, which I know she's probably not. Sorry if I missed your age. A little bit on the heavier side, and that's okay. But she starts going, hey, could you look up? Hey, you need to get your head out of your phone and pay attention. I need to get in the shower. I'm kind of taken back because I'm like, okay, go to the shower. Like, you're right there. The shower's over here. I'm over here. Big triangle here, 20 feet distance, nowhere, not 6 feet, and she's like, you need to keep your head out of the phone and pay attention where you're going. And I'm like, ma'am, I have not moved in 10 minutes. Like, I'm waiting on my wife and kid and mother-in-law to come off the beach. Well, she just starts firing at me. And you can tell she's aggressive because of the mask and the 6 foot distance. I don't have a mask outside at the beach. Imagine that. Dare me. I'm an evil man. But I'm 20 foot from this shower, and she's over there showering off at this point, and she just keeps hammering at me, and I'm just like taken back by it and just trying my best to ignore it. And then finally she says this. I kid you not. Do you know who else stands beside showers? Perverts stand beside showers. Are you a pervert? You're a pervert, aren't you? And this is where I lose my Christianity to some degree because I'm like, look, here's my deal with this. Calling someone a pervert in today's age can ruin their life. Now, it's not going to ruin mine because it's absurd and I'm out at the beach. But this happens in corporate worlds where you get deemed a pervert, a racist, or something like that, and there's absolutely no evidence for you to be those things, but the other party just doesn't like what you're doing, so they just start using these racial or these slurs to ruin your life. And so I lose my mind, not necessarily because she's calling me, because I could imagine this happening to somebody else out in the world that it actually does ruin their life or their marriage or something. Like the whole Me Too movement. Not saying there wasn't anything there that was true, but some of that just became, I'm going to blame everybody for everything that I want to blame them for. Anyways, I lose my stuff, and I'm like, ma'am, do you know what you are? And sorry for the rhetoric, but I go, you're an asshole. And do you know why you're an asshole? Because anyone that would accuse somebody of being a pervert with no evidence is an asshole. And and so it just kind of blew up from there. And I started yelling at her, and she started yelling at me, and she finally left. And some people might go, well, that just wasn't very godly. And you know what? The way I talked, you would be correct. But let me tell you what else isn't very godly. The other thing that's not very godly would be to just walk away and say, well, I'm just going to turn the other cheek, and I'm just going to leave this situation, and I'm just going to let her have the day. And the reason is because that is why we are where we are. Because we let those people have those moments. And we have to challenge those moments. Do it better than I did. But we have to challenge those moments. And I will always, this is where me and Dustin laugh, because, my sin might be that I overly challenge in those moments, and I might say stuff I shouldn't say, and I'll have to repent afterwards, and I'll have to say I'm sorry. But there's the sinful side that we don't recognize are the ones that just leave those moments, right? We've acted like those aren't sinful at all. And that we just let that kind of rhetoric rule the day. And because we let that rhetoric rule the day, it is why we are where we are in this political correct world, instead of calling that for what it is, which is stupid. I mean, that is stupid that somebody ought to be able to get away with saying something like that to another individual in a corporate life or in that kind of a situation. Call me what'd she call me?
Pervert.
A pervert? Call me a pervert because I'm standing 20 foot from a shower, reading my phone, waiting on my wife because she didn't like the fact that I didn't have a mask on the beach? Like, get over yourself. I don't care. And the other thing I did that was really rude, but I did it. I went, you know what? I'm giving you 20 feet. I'm only mandated to give you 6. I'm moving to 7. And so I moved. That's when she left. So I moved to 7 feet. Again, not the Jesus thing. What would Jesus do? I didn't have the bracelet, thank God. But my point is, like, we have to become people that challenge these moments. We cannot continue to give ground and retreat while the world is literally destroying everything that our country is and what has made it beautiful and good. I mean, if you don't think the First Amendment's on the line here, you're wrong. The First Amendment is on the line. in a major way in this election, and for whatever ends up happening inside of it. But I don't know. Just ask yourself, like, what do you do in those moments? Like, what do you do in those moments? I mean, I'll admit I could have handled it better, but I'm done retreating in those moments, and we have to become a people that's done retreating, and we're even willing to have to repent afterwards because of our lack of retreat. Like, I'm at that point. Like, I don't have a problem saying, I didn't handle this the best. And if you're not used to doing that, if you're not used to challenging things, I'll go ahead and tell you, you're probably not going to handle it really well the first couple of times. You're just not, because it's not something you're used to. But you have to get back in the fight, even if it's at the cost of maybe you handling it wrong a couple times, and having to be humble enough to go, I could have done that better. I'll try to implement that the next time.
Yeah, I mean, you're erring on the side of, being protective in a sense, because you recognize the importance of certain rights that we might have, or the potential to be bullied in our world. And one of the things that I've seen it a couple of times, a couple of moments when someone is interviewing Trump and they ask him a question, something along the lines of, why the rhetoric that we hear from you? Why the tweets? Why do you think you could be a little less combative sometimes, or this or that, and he kind of smiles politely, and depending on who's asking the question, because a couple of the town halls, he's like, I appreciate your question and sympathize with it, but perhaps you don't understand. They're coming at me 24/7 with hostility, with confrontation, with things that are totally false, and
and I don't have media outlets to speak up for me or to protect me. Like, I am my own media outlet. We've seen now, Fox was not Trump's media outlet, right?
And Trump himself not claiming to be a born-again evangelical Christian or anything like that. He's just, he says that he is a fighter and he is a counterpuncher. And so, but for him in those moments, the point he's making is you can tell there's a part of him that appreciates the kind of person that could turn the other cheek. He recognizes that perhaps there's a need at times to just let things slide, but he recognizes the fight that he is in. He recognizes the stakes are bigger and more crucial than what the person asking the question seems to realize, because they're not appreciating the fight that he's in every day, not only to get what he sees as the truth out there, but the types of policies and the things that he thinks are valuable, because he would say that the leaders, politicians, government officials in America for too long have been too weak and unwilling to stand up for and fight for the interests of the nation in order to go along to get along with